You know, life can be one heck of a roller coaster. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws a curveball your way, knocking you off balance. Our family had been cruising along pretty smoothly, you know, the usual everyday chaos with our two kids, Timmy and Emily. Until that one night when everything changed. It was a crisp autumn evening, and we just tucked Timmy and Emily into bed. They'd been bouncing off the walls all day, fueled by the excitement of Halloween just around the corner. My wife Sarah and I had settled in for a quiet night, binge watching some TV show we'd been meaning to catch up on. As the hours ticked by, we eventually succumbed to the sweet siren call of sleep. Exhaustion, you know. We figured the kids were out like lights too, but boy, were we in for a rude awakening. Around 2 a.m, I was jolted awake by the sound of the front door creaking open. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. Sarah was still asleep beside me, blissfully unaware of the intrusion. I quickly slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the hallway, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. Who could it be at this hour? A burglar? A neighbor in distress? But when I reached the living room, I couldn't believe my eyes. Timmy and Emily's bedroom door stood wide open, their beds empty. Panic washed over me like an icy wave, and I rushed back to our bedroom, shaking Sarah awake. "Sarah, wake up! The kids are gone," I whispered urgently, my voice trembling. She shot up, her eyes wide with alarm as she processed my words. Without a word, we both dashed to Timmy and Emily's room, our hearts in our throats. Their beds were empty, the covers thrown aside as if they'd been snatched away in haste. We searched the house frantically, calling out their names, but there was no sign of them. It was like they'd vanished into thin air. Now, let me tell you, that was the longest night of my life. We called the police, and they arrived in what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only minutes. We answered their questions, provided descriptions of our kids, and waited with bated breath for any news. Hours turned into days, and days turned into weeks. The search for Timmy and Emily consumed us, and we plastered their pictures all over town. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers joined the search, combing through woods, parks, and abandoned buildings. We held on to hope, but as the days turned into months, that hope began to dwindle. During those long, sleepless nights, I found myself replaying that fateful evening over and over in my mind. What had happened? Who had taken them? Why did they leave without a trace? As a parent, you start to question everything. Did we lock the front door? Was there a way they could have sneaked out without us noticing? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed them somehow. But you know what was even worse? The not knowing. It's like this endless, gnawing ache in your chest. You start to see their faces in every passing child on the street, hear their laughter in the wind, and every time the phone rang, my heart would leap into my throat, hoping for that one call, that one piece of news that would bring them back to us. And then, just when we thought we'd reached the end of our rope, it happened. Late one evening, we received a call from the police. They'd found a lead, a witness who claimed to have seen two children matching Timmy and Emily's descriptions with a man at a remote cabin in the woods. Hope surged within us like a tidal wave. We rushed to the cabin, accompanied by a team of officers. As we approached, the sight that greeted us was surreal. The cabin stood there, silent and foreboding, like something out of a horror movie. With bated breath, we entered the cabin, our hearts pounding like a drumline. The place was dark and damp, filled with a musty odor that clung to the walls. And then, in the corner of the room, we saw them, Timmy and Emily, huddled together, scared but alive. Relief washed over us like a tidal wave. Tears streamed down our faces as we embraced our children, holding them tightly as if we'd never let go. It was a moment of pure, unbridled joy, the culmination of months of uncertainty and fear. Turns out, they'd been abducted by a man who'd taken them to the cabin in the woods. He'd kept them hidden, terrified and alone, until the witness had stumbled upon them. We didn't know the full details, and honestly, we didn't want to. All that mattered was that our kids were back, safe and sound. As we drove home that night, our family reunited at last, I couldn't help but reflect on the fragility of life. How in a single moment, everything you hold dear can be ripped away from you. But it was also a reminder of the power of love, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a parent and their child. So here's the thing, dear reader, you never truly appreciate what you have until it's gone, and the darkest nights often lead to the brightest dawns. Family will never be the same after what we went through, but we've emerged stronger and closer than ever before. And every night when I tuck Timmy and Emily into bed, I hold on to them a little tighter, grateful for the precious gift of family. Hey there, pull up a chair, because I've got a story that'll make your hair stand on end. It all started on a regular, mundane Tuesday afternoon at Millington High School. I was sitting in the back row of Ms. Thompson's history class, half listening to her drone on about the American Revolution, and half daydreaming about what I was going to do after school. The room was stifling, and the only thing that kept me from nodding off was the constant hum of the ancient air conditioner. But then something weird happened. As I lazily scanned the classroom, I noticed that Jenny, the girl who sat in front of me, had suddenly vanished. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. You know how you zone out in class, and your brain starts conjuring up all sorts of weird scenarios. But no, this was different. I rubbed my eyes, blinked a few times, and even pinched myself just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. But when I looked around the classroom, there was no sign of Jenny anywhere. The empty desk in front of me seemed to mock my confusion. I leaned forward, whispering to my buddy Dave, who sat next to me, "Hey, did you see Jenny leave the room or something?" Dave shot me a puzzled look. "Nah, man, I've been paying as much attention as you have, basically zilch." We both shrugged it off, figuring Jenny had snuck out for some reason, or maybe even ditched class altogether. But then the impossible happened. Jenny's desk, the one that had been empty just moments ago, suddenly slid back into place, making a horrible screeching noise against the floor. My heart leaped into my throat, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Dave's eyes widened, and he let out a strangled yelp. Miss Thompson stopped mid-sentence, her gaze flicking to Jenny's desk, confusion etched across her face. "What on earth?" she muttered under her breath, taking a hesitant step toward the desk. But before she could get any closer, it happened again. Jenny's desk jerked forward, this time even more violently, as if some unseen force was trying to pull it through the floor. The classroom erupted into chaos. Students screamed, some ducking under their desks, while others scrambled toward the exit. I was frozen in my seat, unable to tear my eyes away from the inexplicable spectacle unfolding before me. And then, with a final ear-splitting screech, Jenny's desk vanished, just like that, as if it had been swallowed by the earth itself. Miss Thompson stumbled back, her face a mask of terror, as the classroom descended into a frantic frenzy. I couldn't wrap my head around what had just happened. It was like something out of a horror movie. I glanced around, my mind racing, and realized that Jenny wasn't the only one who had disappeared. A few rows ahead, Sarah was gone, and so was Mike, who sat by the window. Panic set in as I realized that students were vanishing one by one, their desks sliding back violently before they were swallowed by the floor. It was utter chaos, and no one had a clue what was happening. Some tried to escape, others hid under their desks, but it was futile. The classroom seemed to have become a death trap, and the terror in the air was palpable. As the minutes ticked by, the room grew eerily silent. Those of us who remained were paralyzed with fear, our eyes darting around the room, waiting for the next desk to slide. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, the fear clawing at my chest like a relentless beast. And then it was just me. I was the only one left, sitting alone in the back row, surrounded by empty desks. The air was thick with dread, and I knew that I was next. I could feel it, like a dark presence looming over me, waiting to strike. As I sat there, trembling and helpless, the lights in the classroom flickered and went out. I was plunged into darkness, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. And then I felt it, a cold, clammy hand closing around my ankle, pulling me down into the darkness. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the howling wind that echoed in my ears. I was falling, tumbling through an endless void, the world around me a chaotic whirlwind of shadows and screams. And then, just like that, it was over. I landed on the cold, hard ground, gasping for air. I was in some sort of underground chamber, the walls lined with rusty pipes and flickering fluorescent lights. The air was damp and smelled of decay. And there, standing before me, was the source of all this horror, a man, or what was left of one. His clothes were tattered and stained, and his eyes were cold, lifeless voids that sent a shiver down my spine. He grinned, revealing a row of rotting teeth, and then he spoke. His voice was a guttural whisper, like the hiss of a snake. "You're the last one," he said, his words sending a chill down my spine. "The others couldn't escape, but you were different." I tried to scream, to fight, but I was paralyzed, unable to move. The man approached, his grin widening, and as he reached out his hand, I realized the horrifying truth. There was no escape. And that, my friend, is how it all ended. So if you ever find yourself in a classroom that suddenly turns into a nightmare, just remember this story, and maybe, just maybe, you'll make it out alive. But then again, maybe not. Hey there, settle in, because I've got a tale that'll make you rethink your definition of normal. You know how it is living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. You wave to your neighbors as you pull out the trash cans and share the occasional pleasantries over the picket fence. Life's predictable, right? Well, let me tell you, it all changed when the folks next door, the Johnsons, disappeared. One day, they were there, and the next, poof, gone without a trace. At first, I thought they'd packed up and moved away. But then, the same thing happened to the Martins, the Smiths, and even the Parkers across the street. I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but when half your neighborhood evaporates into thin air, you can't help but get a little paranoid. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't keeping an eye on the bushes when I went to fetch the morning paper. Now here's the kicker. I tried asking around, but nobody knew anything. It was as if the Johnsons, Martins, Smiths, and Parkers had never existed. When I mentioned their names, people just stared at me like I was speaking an alien language. I mean, come on, it's a small neighborhood, and we all knew each other, right? So either we were suffering from a mass case of collective amnesia, or something seriously messed up was going on. Every night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. You know the prickly sensation at the back of your neck? It became a permanent fixture, like an unwelcome neighbor, and it was driving me nuts. One evening, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I donned my darkest hoodie, equipped myself with a pair of binoculars, and decided to stake out the Johnsons' old place. I figured that if there was anything strange going on, it would be right there in the heart of it. As I crouched behind a shrub, peering through my binoculars, I couldn't believe my eyes. A black van had pulled up in front of the Johnsons' house. Men in suits, shades, and Federalist, total gangster movie material, were unloading boxes and crates, hauling them into the house like it was moving day. Questions spun through my mind like a tornado. Who were these guys? What were they doing at the Johnsons? And where the heck were the Johnsons? I decided to get a little closer, risking it all for the sake of finding out the truth. I slipped through the shadows, creeping closer to the house, until I was hidden behind the bushes in their front yard. My heart raced, my palms were sweaty, and the adrenaline surged through my veins. Through a partially open window, I could hear muffled voices. My gut told me to back off, but curiosity had me firmly in its grip. I leaned closer, trying to make out the words. "They won't be coming back," a voice hissed, and it sent shivers down my spine. "We've taken care of everything." The pieces of this twisted puzzle were slowly falling into place. It was like some sort of mafia operation, and the neighbors, my friends and acquaintances, had somehow gotten involved. As I retreated from the Johnsons' house, I knew I had to do something. But what? Call the cops? Sure, but I had no proof. Who would believe a story like this? And besides, if they were involved, they might already have the police in their pocket. I spent the next few days digging deeper into the mystery. Late nights turned into early mornings as I scoured the web, trying to find any information on the disappearance of the Johnsons, Martins, Smiths, and Parkers. There had to be something, a breadcrumb trail leading to the truth. And then I hit the jackpot, a news article from a few years back about a notorious underground mafia group operating in the area. They were known for their ability to make people disappear without a trace, leaving behind a void where their victims once stood. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. It seemed that the mafia group had infiltrated our quiet neighborhood, using it as a cover for their sinister operations. But why? What did they want? And how had they managed to make everyone forget? I had to act fast. I knew that if I didn't get out of there, I'd be the next one to vanish. I packed a bag with essentials and made my escape under the cover of darkness. I left behind the life I'd known, the neighborhood that had become a haunted maze, and the memories of friends who were now mere phantoms. As I drove away, I couldn't help but look in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see the black van with its ominous occupants following me. But the road stretched out ahead, leading me away from the nightmare I'd left behind. So, dear reader, remember this: if your neighbors start disappearing one by one, it might not be a simple case of people moving away. Sometimes, the most ordinary places hide the darkest secrets, and you never know who might be watching, waiting for the moment to make you the next victim of their twisted game.